1941, Columbia Record Studio. Billie Holiday placed the sheet music on the table and looked at record company president John Hammond. "I want to record this song." Hammond glanced at the sheet. His face changed when he saw the title Gloomy Sunday. "No, Billie. I can't let you record this song," he said, and his voice was firm. Billie was surprised because Hammond had always supported her. "Why?" she asked. Hammond looked at the other executives in the room before answering, then spoke in a low voice. "Because the lyrics of this song tell your story, Billie. And if we release this song, you'll fulfill its prophecy." At that moment, Billie didn't understand. But years later, in 1959, lying on her deathbed at Metropolitan Hospital, she remembered that conversation, and she finally understood why Gloomy Sunday was banned. Because the song had written Billie's fate 18 years in advance. Before you continue watching this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications, because behind Billie Holiday's Gloomy Sunday story lies one of music history's most chilling prophecies, and you won't want to miss it. The song's story began 8 years before Billie Holiday, across the ocean. In 1933, in Budapest, a Hungarian composer named Rezes Szerszers was going through the darkest period of his life. His girlfriend had left him, his money had run out, and depression was deepening every day. One Sunday morning, he sat at the piano in his small apartment, and when he placed his hands on the keys, the gloom inside him transformed into melody. In 9 hours, without getting up once, he wrote Szomorú Vasárnap, Gloomy Sunday. The melody was so dark that Szerszers himself had cried when he finished it. But what was truly shocking was the song's effect. The first time he played it at a cafe, one of the listeners went outside and jumped into the Danube River. In his pocket was a note, Gloomy Sunday. This first incident was the beginning of a series of tragic events. Over the next 5 years, 19 suicides in Hungary were linked to Gloomy Sunday. Each had the same pattern. The person listened to the song, then committed suicide, mentioning the song in the note left behind. Newspapers called it the suicide song, and radio stations refused to broadcast it. But the ban made the song even more enticing. Gloomy Sunday spread across Europe, Vienna, Berlin, Paris, London, and everywhere it went, news of death followed. In 1936, the BBC officially banned the song. In France, radio stations fired DJs who played Gloomy Sunday. In Germany, the Nazi regime classified the song as content that undermines public morale. But the strangest ban came from England. The song could only be played in instrumental versions. The lyrics were strictly forbidden. Because according to authorities, it was the lyrics rather than the melody that incited suicide, and the lyrics were truly horrifying. The song told the story of someone mourning after their lover's suicide. Each verse depicted deepening despair, and in the final verse, the narrator decided to follow their lover. This wasn't just a love song, it was a poetic recipe for a double suicide. And as death reports continued to accumulate in Europe, the music industry was panicking. Nobody wanted to touch Gloomy Sunday because the song was cursed. When the song came to America in 1940, record companies had already been warned, stay away from this song. The English version of Gloomy Sunday was adapted by Sam M. Lewis, and the first American recording was made in 1941. But Lewis tried to soften the original Hungarian lyrics, reducing themes of hopelessness, hiding suicide references. Still, the essence of the song remained unchanged, dark, gloomy, and profoundly sad. When the first recording was made by Paul Robeson, Robeson's manager was worried. "This song doesn't fit your image, Paul," he'd said. "You're a symbol of hope and strength. This song is about death and hopelessness." But Robeson insisted, and made the recording. 3 months later, Robeson experienced a severe depression crisis, and nearly ended his career. Robeson never sang Gloomy Sunday publicly again after that. Artie Shaw, the famous clarinet virtuoso and bandleader, recorded an instrumental version of Gloomy Sunday in 1941, and a few weeks later, Shaw disbanded his orchestra, took a break from his career, and withdrew from public life. He told friends, "Every time I play Gloomy Sunday, something inside me dies." These cases raised alarm bells in the American music industry. Gloomy Sunday wasn't just a song, it was like a psychological weapon, and nobody wanted to put that weapon in Billie Holiday's hands. Because everyone knew Billie Holiday was already in a fragile state of mind. Drug use, toxic relationships, constant FBI surveillance, and most importantly, the deep depression inside her. Billie's close friends knew she often talked about suicide. "Sometimes I want to die," she'd once told piano player Bobby Tucker. "This world is too heavy for me." And now Billie Holiday wanted to record the darkest song, the song that reflected her own darkness. For Columbia Records, this was unacceptable. Not just because of public reaction. Billie's safety was at stake too. John Hammond was one of Billie Holiday's biggest supporters. He'd discovered her, guided her career. But when it came to Gloomy Sunday, Hammond categorically refused. And the reason was more than just the song's reputation. Hammond had read the lyrics, and was horrified. Because every line seemed to describe Billie Holiday's life. In March 1941, at Columbia Records' office, a historic argument took place between Billie Holiday and John Hammond. Billie came with the sheet music for Gloomy Sunday, and placed it on the table. "This song is perfect for me, John. I feel it. I have to record it." Hammond took a deep breath. How would he explain this to Billie? Should he tell her the song was cursed? How would he tell a woman known for not believing in superstitions that a melody could bring death? Hammond chose a different approach. "Billie, have you looked at the lyrics of this song?" "Really looked?" Billie nodded. "Of course I have. It's about loss and grief. That's why I want to sing it." Hammond stood up and walked to the window. Outside, New York traffic flowed. People went to work, life seemed normal. But in this room, Hammond had to decide between Billie's life and death. "Billie," Hammond finally said, "this song isn't just about loss, it's about suicide. And you've already suffered too much. Singing this song won't help you. It'll pull you deeper." Billie laughed. "John, do you really believe songs can kill people? That's ridiculous." But Hammond's face was serious. "Billie, I don't believe the song has magical powers. But I do believe in your psychological condition. And the lyrics of this song will externalize your darkest thoughts. If you sing this song every day, you normalize suicide every day. And one day, just one bad day, those thoughts could spiral out of control." Billie fell silent. There was truth in Hammond's logic. Billie knew her own inner struggles, depression cycles, moments of hopelessness. And maybe Hammond was right. Maybe singing this song every day would strengthen those dark thoughts. But at the same time, Billie Holiday was an artist. And artists healed by expressing their pain. Right? "John, art is therapy." Billie said. "If I sing this song, maybe I'll release the darkness inside me." Hammond shook his head. "Or maybe that darkness will consume you, Billie." The argument went on for hours. Other executives in the room joined in, and they all supported Hammond. Finally, Billie gave up, said, but reluctantly, "Okay, John. I won't record it for now. But someday, I will sing this song." Hammond breathed a sigh of relief. He thought he'd protected Billie. But in reality, he'd only postponed the inevitable. 6 months later, in October 1941, Billie Holiday did something John Hammond never knew about. Or knew but chose to deny. Billie secretly rented a small studio, and found a sound engineer. "I need to record a song," she told the engineer. "But nobody can know." The sound engineer didn't ask questions when he saw the money. And one October night, after midnight, Billie Holiday stood before the microphone, and began singing Gloomy Sunday. In the first notes, the engineer noticed something strange. Billie's voice was different than usual. Billie were darker, with pain coming from within. as if the song was coming from the depths of Billie's soul. In the second verse, Billie's hands began trembling. In the third verse, tears streamed from her eyes. And at the final note, Billie dropped the microphone and collapsed to the floor. The sound engineer rushed over Miss Holiday. "Are you okay?" Billie couldn't answer. For several minutes she sat there, head in her hands, crying silently. When she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper. "This song ate me from the inside. I lost a piece of myself with every note." The engineer was worried. "Do you want me to erase the recording?" Billie raised her head, and there was a strange determination in her eyes. "No, someday someone needs to listen to this. Someday someone needs to understand. This song isn't just a melody, it's a confession." The recording was made, and the engineer put it in an envelope and archived it. Billie paid the money and left, and that recording stayed there for 64 years. Forgotten, a secret nobody knew. But as she left the studio that night, Billie Holiday noticed something. The darkness inside her had deepened even more. Singing Gloomy Sunday hadn't brought her relief. On the contrary, it had strengthened those dark thoughts. Hammond was right, and Billie understood that. But too late. Because once you sing it, Gloomy Sunday doesn't let you go. Like a virus in your mind, it slowly spreads and poisons all your thoughts. Billie couldn't sleep for weeks after that night. Every time she closed her eyes, the song's melody spun in her head. In every moment of silence, the lyrics whispered. And worst of all, she began to feel that the song's prophecy would come true. The lyrics of Gloomy Sunday were about loss and suicide, and when you look at Billie Holiday's life, you see terrifying parallels. In the song, the narrator loses their loved one, and then contemplates ending their own life. In Billie's life too there was constant loss. Her father Clarence Holiday died in 1937, and Billie couldn't say goodbye. Her mother Sadie Fagan had a toxic relationship with Billie, and when she died in 1945, Billie didn't cry at the funeral because that relationship had already died. Billie's love life was full of disasters. Jimmy Monroe, John Levy, Louis McKay, each exploited, abused, and abandoned Billie. Each breakup fed the darkness inside Billie, and depression deepened with each passing year. Prison in 1947, increasing drug addiction in the 1950s, revocation of her cabaret card in 1956, each disaster brought Billie closer to that prophetic end. In the final verse of Gloomy Sunday, the narrator decides to die on Sunday, and Billie Holiday, she died on July 17, 1959. Not Friday, not Sunday, but the symbolic weight of her death carried the song's spirit. When John Hammond made that decision in 1941, he was trying to protect Billie, but he couldn't. Because even though Billie Holiday didn't officially record Gloomy Sunday, the song had caught her. That secret recording session had planted the seed, and that seed grew, sprouted over the years, and finally choked Billie's soul. This isn't superstition, it's psychology. Repetitive dark thoughts reprogram the brain. Constant exposure to themes of death and loss deepens depression, and Billie Holiday sang the darkest songs throughout her career. Strange Fruit, God Bless the Child, Gloomy Sunday. Each meant reliving the pain, and this reliving wasn't healing, it was destructive. Psychologist Dr. Viktor Frankl, in his work on trauma, says, expressing pain can be healing, but fetishizing pain, internalizing it, identifying with it, is destructive. Billie Holiday had identified with Gloomy Sunday, and that identification killed her. To complete Gloomy Sunday's story, we need to look at the fate of its composer Reza Sayris, because he too became a victim of his song. In 1968, 35 years after writing the song, Sayris jumped from the window of his Budapest apartment and died. Before his death, he left a note that read, "Gloomy Sunday made me famous but also cursed me. Every time this song is played, something inside me dies. I can't take it anymore." Cyrus had tried to escape his song throughout his life. He wrote other songs, composed more cheerful melodies, but none was as successful as Gloomy Sunday. And over time, Cyrus became known only as the composer of Gloomy Sunday. His identity became synonymous with that dark song, and that identification destroyed him. Friends said Cyrus was in deep depression in his final years. Reza Say didn't smile anymore, said one friend. He constantly talked about his song. He'd say, "I wish I'd never written it. This song stole my soul." And on that January day in 1968, Cyrus climbed to the window and jumped. His death caused great shock in Budapest, but also seemed inevitable. The composer of Gloomy Sunday had lived out his own song's prophecy. Billie Holiday might not have known about Cyrus's death because Cyrus died in 1968 and Billie in 1959. But if she had known, she wouldn't have been surprised. Because Billie was living the same prophecy. Gloomy Sunday wasn't just a song, Sid, it was a fate. And once you took that melody inside you, it didn't let go. This is one of music history's darkest paradoxes. Can a work of art destroy its creator and interpreters? Gloomy Sunday answers yes to this question. Because the song wasn't just notes and lyrics, it was a psychological trigger, and when it touched the right minister wrong person, it became destructive. In the 1950s, Billie Holiday's life rapidly deteriorated. Drug addiction spiraled out of control, health problems increased, and her financial situation became catastrophic. But worst of all, that darkness inside her meant that Gloomy Sunday darkness could no longer be hidden. At her concerts, fans noticed Billie was different. Her voice had changed, there was an emptiness in her eyes, and her performances were becoming increasingly melancholic. In 1956, she told a friend, "Sometimes when I'm singing on stage, I feel like I'm living someone else's life, like the real Billie died long ago, and I'm just a ghost." This statement perfectly described Gloomy Sunday's effect. Billie had become disconnected from her own life. She was living inside the song's prophecy. And every day she was getting a little closer to that end. In May 1959, Billie Holiday spoke to a friend about Gloomy Sunday for the last time. "I'm glad I never recorded that song," she said. "But somehow that song caught me. It plays in my head every day, and I know Minius that song is writing my end." 2 months later, in July 1959, Billie Holiday was admitted to Metropolitan Hospital. Cirrhosis, kidney failure, and heart problems were killing her. But in Billie's mind, there was something else. The melody of Gloomy Sunday. Lying in her hospital bed, Billie whispered to her close friend Alice Verbsky, "Alice, do you hear that song? It's playing in my head, Gloomy Sunday." Hammond was right. "This song killed me." Alice was crying. "Billie, stop talking nonsense. You got sick, that's all. The song has nothing to do with it." But Billie shook her head. "No, Alice, that song wrote my fate 18 years ago, and now that prophecy is coming true." July 17, 1959, 3:10 a.m. Billie Holiday took her last breath. In the room were nurses, a doctor and FBI agents. Yes, they were still following Billie even on her deathbed. But in Billie's mind, there was someone else, Reza Cyrus, the composer of Gloomy Sunday. They had never met but shared the same fate. Both were victims of that cursed song. 40-6 years later, in 2005, a music archivist was examining Columbia Records' old files, when he came across a dusty envelope. Written by hand on the envelope was Billie Holiday, Gloomy Sunday, 1941, secret recording. Not to be released. When the archivist opened the envelope, he found a record and a note inside. The note was written by the sound engineer who was in the studio that night. "This recording must never be released. Miss Holiday collapsed after singing the song. This recording is traumatic for her. Will inform John Hammond." But apparently the engineer never told Hammond. Or he did, and Hammond forgot to destroy the recording. Either way, the recording was there, hidden, forgotten for 64 years. When the archivist listened to the recording, he was shocked. Billie Holiday's voice had that familiar vibrato and depth, but there was something else, pure hopelessness. Every note was a scream. Every word was like a farewell. And at the end of the song, the microphone had captured Billie's sobs. The archivist reported the recording to Columbia Records management and debate began. Should this recording be released? Some said yes. This is Billie Holiday's lost work. It has historical importance. Some said no, this recording was made against Billie's wishes, and is traumatic. It shouldn't be released. Finally, a compromise was reached. The recording could be listened to for academic purposes, but couldn't be sold commercially. In 2006, the recording was donated to the Smithsonian Institution, and access was provided to music historians. And everyone who listened to that recording said the same thing. This is Billie Holiday's most disturbing performance. Because this wasn't just a song. It was a prophecy. And Billie had recorded that prophecy in her own voice 18 years earlier. Musicologist Dr. Emily Anderson wrote an article about the recording in 2007. Billie Holiday's Gloomy Sunday recording is the musical manifestation of psychological trauma. In every note, the death wish echoes. In every lyric, she foresees her future death. This recording is one of the most unsettling documents in music history. Anderson's analysis sparked debate in academic circles. Some said the recording posed psychological danger, that it could affect listeners. Some argued this was nonsense, that it was just a song. But everyone agreed on one thing. Billie Holiday's Gloomy Sunday should never be released to the general public, because the risk was too high. How does modern psychology explain the Gloomy Sunday phenomenon? Can a song really drive people to suicide? The answer is complex. Dr. Thomas Joyner, in his research on suicide, developed the interpersonal theory of suicide. According to this theory, suicide requires a combination of three factors: lack of belongingness, perceived burdensomeness, and acquired capability for self-harm. Gloomy Sunday has content that triggers all three factors. The song depicts deep loneliness and loss of connection. Triggering the first factor, the song describes the meaninglessness of surviving after a loved one's death. Triggering the second factor, the song romanticizes death, presenting it as a painless end for someone already experiencing these three factors. Like Billie Holiday, the song was validating and strengthening those dark thoughts. This is the psychological confirmation effect. The thought "Gloomy Sunday understands me" transforms into the perception feeling like Gloomy Sunday is normal, and eventually reaches the conclusion, acting like Gloomy Sunday is acceptable. Dr. K. Redfield Jamieson, a psychiatrist specializing in depression and creativity, analyzed Billie Holiday's case like this. For artists with fragile mental health like Billie Holiday, art with dark content can be both therapy and danger. If the artist can maintain distance while expressing pain, it's healing. But if the artist completely identifies with the pain, it's destructive. Billie Holiday's relationship with Gloomy Sunday falls into the second category. She identified with the song, and that identification destroyed her. This analysis vindicates John Hammond's 1941 decision. Hammond didn't believe in superstitions, but he understood psychology, and he was trying to protect Billie from that dangerous identification. Unfortunately, he couldn't, because Billie sang the song despite the ban, and at that moment, fate was sealed. Billie Holiday and Reza Sayers were Gloomy Sunday's most famous victims, but they weren't the only ones. Music history has other tragic stories associated with this song. Paul Robeson experienced serious depression after recording the song in 1941 and nearly ended his career. Robeson refused to talk about Gloomy Sunday in subsequent interviews and once said, "Recording that song was the biggest mistake of my life." Artie Shaw, clarinet virtuoso, recorded the instrumental version of the song in 1941, and shortly after, Shaw unexpectedly disbanded his orchestra, withdrew from stages, and stayed away from the public for years. Friends said Shaw was different after Gloomy Sunday, constantly gloomy and introverted. Lydia Limpany, English pianist, attempted suicide after playing Gloomy Sunday in the 1950s. Limpany survived but said in later interviews, "After playing that song, something changed inside me, like a dark door opened and never closed." These cases can't be explained by superstition, but they can be explained by psychology. Gloomy Sunday has triggering content for people with a certain psychological profile, depressive tendencies, high empathy capacity, artistic and emotionally sensitive individuals. When people with this profile listen to or play the song, they experience deep identification, and this identification strengthens already existing dark thoughts. This is the emotional contagion effect. Music is one of the most powerful tools for transmitting emotions, and Gloomy Sunday transmits the darkest emotions: hopelessness, loss, suicidal ideation. For someone who internalizes these emotions, the song works like a kind of psychological virus, slowly spreading poisoning thoughts, and eventually turning into action. This is a scientific fact, and Gloomy Sunday is the darkest example of this fact. In the 1970s, after retirement, John Hammond spoke about Billie Holiday and Gloomy Sunday in an interview. This was the first time Hammond had publicly commented on the subject. When Billie told me in 1941 that she wanted to record Gloomy Sunday, and categorically refused, Hammond said, "And my reason was simple. Billie was already very fragile. Drugs, toxic relationships, FBI pressure, everything was tearing her apart. And I knew that if she sang that song every day, those dark thoughts would normalize. And one day, on one bad day, those thoughts could spiral out of control." The interviewer asked, "But Mr. Hammond, do you really believe a song can kill someone?" Hammond paused. "A song doesn't kill someone, but a song feeds the darkness that's already there. And the darkness inside Billie didn't need feeding. Billie, it was already big enough." Then Hammond said something else, a shocking confession. "When Billie died in 1959, I visited her final days in the hospital, and Billie told me something. 'John,' she said, 'you were right. Gloomy Sunday killed me. I'm glad I never recorded it, but I sang it. I sang it secretly. And at that moment everything ended. I was shocked. I didn't know Billie had recorded secretly, and at that moment I understood. I tried to protect Billie but I couldn't, because she made her own decisions, and those decisions killed her.'" This confession had a major impact on music history, because Hammond was a respected figure, and his words were taken seriously. And now, Hammond was saying openly, Gloomy Sunday had killed Billie Holiday. Not directly, of course, but indirectly, psychologically, emotionally. The song had fed, strengthened, and finally realized the death urge inside Billie. This wasn't a metaphorical death, it was a real death, and Hammond had carried this truth for years. Guilt, regret, and helplessness, because he couldn't save Billie. Nobody could. Today, in the 2020s, is Gloomy Sunday still dangerous? Is the song still banned? The answer is complex. The song isn't banned anymore. It can be played and listened to freely in most countries, but some radio stations still refuse to play the song. And some psychology experts warn that the song can be triggering for depressed individuals. On platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, there are dozens of versions of Gloomy Sunday. Sarah Vaughan, even though Billie Holiday's official recording doesn't exist, other artists have recorded it. Sinead O'Connor, Bjork Missions, all have made their own versions, and some listeners talk about the song's effect. One Spotify comment says, "After listening to this song, I cried for 2 days. It took me to a place I had trouble getting out of." Another comment, "This song is dangerous. If you're depressed, don't listen. It pulls you deeper." These comments show that Gloomy Sunday still has psychological power, Maybe not as much as in the 1930s, because now people are warned and aware, but still, the effect is there. Psychologist Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, an expert on emotion science, explains the Gloomy Sunday phenomenon like this: music directly affects our brain's emotion centers, and some music, like Gloomy Sunday, creates particularly strong emotional responses. If the listener already has depressive tendencies, the song amplifies those feelings. This is a neurological fact. That's why Gloomy Sunday can be genuinely dangerous for a certain population. Barrett's analysis shows that modern science validates the Gloomy Sunday legend. The song doesn't have magical powers, but it has psychological and neurological effects, and these effects can be deadly for the right missions or wrong person. Today, mental health professionals put Gloomy Sunday in the triggering content category, just like violent images, trauma narratives, and they advise individuals experiencing depression, suicidal thoughts, or loss not to listen to the song. This isn't overreaction, it's scientific precaution. Billie Holiday's legacy can't be defined by Gloomy Sunday. She was much more: missions, an icon, a revolutionary, a voice. But the Gloomy Sunday story is part of Billie's struggle, because this story tells of the battle between an artist's desire to express pain, and that pain's destructive power. Billie Holiday poured her pain into song, throughout her life. Strange Fruit was the pain of racism. God Bless the Child was the pain of poverty. Gloomy Sunday was the pain of death wish. And in expressing these pains, Billie was both healing and hurting. This is the artist's paradox. You must suffer to create, but that suffering can destroy you. Billie Holiday lived and died in this paradox, and Gloomy Sunday is the darkest example of this paradox. Today, when Billie Holiday's music is listened to, we don't just hear a voice, we hear a woman's struggle, the effort to survive, the pain of failure, and finally the surrender. Gloomy Sunday was the song Billie didn't sing missions officially, but in reality, Billie sang that song every day, in every performance, every note, every tear. Because Gloomy Sunday wasn't just a song, it was the melody of Billie Holiday's life. In 1941, in the Columbia record studio, when John Hammond said no to Billie Holiday, he was trying to stop a prophecy. But prophecies can't be stopped, because they don't create the future missions, they just show it. And Gloomy Sunday showed Billie Holiday's future. Every line of the song wrote Billie's fate, loss, loneliness, death. And Billie read that prophecy, internalized it, and lived it. This is one of music history's darkest stories, but it's also one of the most instructive, because it shows us art is powerful, both healing and destructive, and artists must be strong enough to carry this power, otherwise that power destroys them. Billie Holiday wasn't strong enough, or maybe she was too strong. That's why she felt every pain, lived every lyric, internalized every note. And finally, that power consumed her. Gloomy Sunday never made it into Billie Holiday's official discography, but still, it killed her, because the song wasn't just a melody that needed to be recorded, it was a prophecy that needed to be lived, and Billie Holiday lived that prophecy to the very end. Today, when Gloomy Sunday is listened to, remember Billie Holiday, and remember that some songs are just listened to. Some take your life. Gloomy Sunday was the second kind, and Billie Holiday was the most painful proof of that.